Hello. Now we are going to look at income tax and the amount of money we get to keep when we go and do a job. So the main issue with income tax questions is keeping the story, the structure in mind, because there's quite a lot of language going on. There's lots of names for the same things, and there's no direct equation that we can find in the exam papers. We have to tell ourselves the story of what each thing means and how it relates. So there's a bunch of definitions here, and we will run through them fairly quickly. Gross income is the amount of money that we might have as our salary, which might be for a year, or our wage, which might be weekly or monthly. It's the income we get before any tax is removed from it, before any deductions are removed from it, because there are actually other deductions than tax, things that get taken away. Its name is GI for gross income. So we're going to use stand-in names, shorter names, to keep track so we don't have to write these long English words. The next thing is net income, which is also called net pay, or it could also be called take-home pay. So lots of names for the same thing. This is the income after we have taken away deductions, usually tax. So our net income, NI, is equal to our gross income minus deductions. And often those deductions will be tax, but they can be other things as well. Tax credit is part of calculating the deductions. It's tax that we figure out, the government tells us we don't have to pay. And then we have gross tax, which is the percentage of income, or a percentage that we are told to pay of our income in tax. So the gross tax is some percentage that we're given multiplied by the gross income. And later we'll see this can get a little bit more complicated, like we can see in this example here, but we'll get to that. And then the net tax, which is also called the tax payable, is the gross tax minus the tax credit. So we work out the gross tax, it's a percentage of our gross income, and then we subtract away the tax credit, the tax we don't have to pay. So our net tax is our gross tax minus our tax credit. So we can see there's a lot of stories we have to keep in mind as we are going through our income tax type questions. So keeping the structure as we practice these questions is absolutely critical to long-term success with them. Now, let's get into a question and use some of this language. Grace's weekly wage, so we see a weekly wage, that means we're talking about gross income, our income before taxes and deductions, is €560. Their tax credit is €40, and the tax at the moment is just going to be at 20%. So we want to find the gross tax. So the gross tax is a particular percentage of our income, and that's in this case just going to be 20%. It will get more complicated in a moment, but now it's just 20%. So part one, we want to get the gross tax, which we call capital G, capital T. So part one, we're getting the gross tax, and that is going to be the 20% tax. So it's going to be 20% of our income that we've got here is going to go on tax. So we want to get 20% of €560. So that is going to be 20% means per 100, 20 out of 100, of means multiply of €560. We can put that into our calculator, or perhaps we can put this in separately, and we get 0.2 is what we get from our calculator by 560. So our gross tax is going to come to €112. So that is our gross tax. Now to get our net tax, the second thing that we are asked about. Well, our net tax, which we call NT for net tax, write down the story of how we're going to get it. Always write this down because it's critical to how we're going to remember all of these stories that we have to keep going with. So our net tax, our tax payable, so net tax, tax payable mean the same thing. So the amount of tax you actually have to pay is equal to our gross tax that we just calculated minus the tax credit being the amount of money we don't have to pay in tax. The government says we don't actually need all of this €112. We can say you don't need to pay €40 of that. So that tax credit gets taken away from our gross tax. So our gross tax we just calculated is 112 when we minus 40 away from it, and we end up with 72 euro. So that's our net tax, or our tax payable is another word that they could use for that. And now our net pay. So our net pay, which we would often call net income. So I'll call it NI here because that's usually what we will call it when we're doing our questions. Net income or net pay or take-home pay is the money we actually get to take home. So what is that going to be equal to? That's going to be equal to our gross income minus all of the deductions. And often those deductions will be tax. Usually tax will at least be involved, perhaps be the main thing. So in this case, the only deductions we have, the only thing that's being taken away from our income, the only thing we're told about in the question is going to be that tax, that net tax that we just got, the tax payable of 72 euro. So in this case, our net income is going to be our gross income minus our net tax. There will be other things that get taken away in the long run, but this is what we have to worry about for this question. So we tell ourselves this story. This is how I'm going to get my net income. I have my starting income, my gross income, or my salary or my wage, and I'm taking away the amount of tax that I'm told I have to pay. So now we just sub in those numbers because we know both of them. The net income is going to be equal to the Grace's gross income minus the net tax of 72 euro, which was our gross tax minus our tax credit. And we end up with 488 euro. That's our net income, which you could also call your take-home pay or your net pay. Now, that is a situation where we only had one tax level, but we actually have two tax levels. We have a tax level of 20%, like we calculated here, for lower amounts of income. And then once we go past a particular threshold, a particular cutoff point, all of the money we earn above that amount gets charged at, or taxed at, I should say, 40%. So up to, this is not the actual standard rate cutoff point that we use, but as an example to make the numbers very straightforward, if we imagine that we had a gross income of 11,000 euro, and we were then told there was a standard rate cutoff point. The standard rate is 20%. So the cutoff point for the standard rate of tax in this example is going to be 10,000 euro. Well, that means that on the first 10,000 euro we earn, we are going to pay 20% of it in tax, just like we just worked out here. And on the final 1,000 that we earn, on the final 1,000 only that we earn, we are going to pay 40% of that in tax. So how do we calculate that? Well, the tax at 40% is going to be 40% of our 11,000 minus 10,000. I'm missing some zeros there. So we have our 11,000 minus 10,000. So we're only paying 40% on that final top 1,000 that we earned. Everything else gets charged at 20%. And it's important that we use this structure, that we keep track of this as we go through the questions, because sometimes we can be asked to work backwards with these questions, and having this structure well laid down is really important. So again, storytelling is the key to success in this type of work, as it so often is. So our gross tax now is a little bit more complicated. It's not just 20% of something. It's going to be 20%, the amount we have to pay at the 20% rate, the lower rate, or the standard rate, and then the higher rate of tax, the 40% rate, how much do we have to pay there? And our gross tax is now the two of them added together. This is our total gross tax. Now let's put this into practice. Joel's salary, that means yearly income, is 35,000. Their tax credit is 900 euro. Their standard rate cutoff point is 20,000 euro. Find the gross tax, the net tax, and the net income. So let's get our gross tax. And we now know that this is going to be a little bit more complicated than it was before, because we're going to have the first 20,000 of Joel's income is going to get charged at 20% tax, and the last 15,000, so from 20,000 up to the 35,000, is going to get charged at 40% tax. So let's draw in our quick diagram. So what we've done is we've drawn our quick diagram just to remind us of what's happening. So our income starts here at 0 and we go all the way up to 20,000 euro, and then past that 20,000 euro mark, that's our standard rate cutoff point. We go from paying 20% tax up to 40% tax. So the 20% tax is fairly straightforward. The first 20,000 we earn is going to be charged at 20%, so 20 out of 100, which is 0.2 times 20,000, which ends up being 4,000. Up here, we have a slightly more complicated formula, because we have to remember that it's from 20,000 up to 35,000, so that's going to be 15,000. The last 15,000 we earn up to our 35,000 is going to be paid at 40% tax. So when we when we calculate that, we get 6,000. So what's our gross tax going to be? That's going to be our tax at 20% plus our tax at 40%. It's going to be 20% is 4,000 plus our tax at 40% is 6,000. So in total, we are paying 10,000 euro in tax. So part 2, we're asked about our net tax, or our tax payable is also what this could be called. That's our gross tax minus our tax credit. Now we've got our gross tax and we know what our tax credit is. It's going to be our 900 euro. So we have gross net tax is going to be equal to our 10,000 minus our 900. And we get our net tax is going to be 9,100. Yep. It's 9,100 euro. And then finally, we have our net income. So that's the amount of money we actually get to take home. So it's called take home pay as well. And we know that that is going to be our gross income, gross income minus deductions. And in this case, that means it's our gross income minus our net tax, because we don't have any other deductions that we're told about in the question. So let's write that out. And we sub in, we know our gross income is 35,000. We know our net tax that we just calculated is 9,100. So when we subtract those from each other, we get 25,900 is the amount of money we get to take home. It's the amount of money after tax. It's the take home pay, or the net income. Throughout these questions, the most important takeaway is these steps here where I'm telling myself, say the gross tax is the tax at 20% plus the tax at 40%. I'm drawing my picture. I'm writing out where I'm getting each of these things from on paper. This ability to tell ourselves the story of these questions is absolutely essential. So that is what we need to focus on, and that is what we need for now.